Hello, everybody. It is Tara Boothby, and I'm here with Jody Hoffman. And Jody and I met up this summer. So we're continuing our conversations for restoration. So, hi, Jody.
Hi, I'm so glad to see you. It's so nice to be with you again.
I know
Kind of feel like we're back
I was so
in
excited.
Oregon.
Yeah, I saw your face and I was just like, Jody, I love you so much. So Jody,
Oh,
I adore you and you have so many interesting things to talk about. But maybe you could just start off by sharing some of your story, like um uh, yeah, basically starting where you start. There's so much life that you've lived.
there it, it is a whole lot of life I've lived. I'm old. I feel really blessed to be old, however, and feel like if I would have known that being this old was going to feel this good, I would have been excited along the way to get here.
Mm.
But everybody makes it look like getting old is going to be awful. And so, kind of in that realm, I just want to tell people, hey, being old can be pretty great. I'm 71 and I play pickleball and I walk 3 to 5 miles a day. I have just a great life, and who knew it could be so happy? So
Yeah, you live with
that
lots
part
of
I,
meaning.
I start, yeah. But how I got here has not been as easy a road. It's interesting how there's like segments of your life that you can look back on and see, like, this was a really hard, the first 20 years were a really hard part of my life. Um, then I met my husband, and then the next 40 years are amazing. And then he passes away, and now it's been hard, but good, but hard, but good, but hard, but good. Like, it's such a balance of that. Uh, so it kind of teeters always on the good, but the missing him is always the sad bad. Um, but I also just think about what he's doing and how he's living and what's going on with him and all the fun that he's having. And so then I just get really excited and happy for him, and thinking what he must be enjoying. So that
Yeah.
helps. And just a host of amazing good memories of those 40 years that seem to be just the best.
Yeah, and so with your husband too,
So,
um just to notice, because I like how you speak about him, like with his passing was unexpected, but how you talk about him is you talk about him with life, like you're imagining him or believing in a vibrance or
yeah.
something, that which is, I'm so curious how you do that or what that means to you.
Well, part of the real beauty of it is, like, we believe God and we believe in what he says. And so we lived 40 years in ministry, and um, always knew that there was going to be a hope and a future. You know what I mean? Like, that when you die, it's not the end. He would say, as I think D.L. Moody had said way back when, that when you read in the headlines that I'm gone or I'm dead, don't believe it. I'm more alive than ever. And
Mm.
so my thinking and thoughts of him are that he's more alive than he's ever been. He had polio when he was 10 months old. And when he was just learning to pull up on the crib, and when he was pulling up on the crib, he just got like a virus and a fever. And that's what polio was. And you didn't know while you had the fever how it was going to affect you when the fever had left. And so the days of his fever, they didn't know what was going on. And for some people, it was affecting their lungs, things inside. They had to be on an iron breathing machine. There were people that affected their arms or legs, like you just never knew. For him, he couldn't pull up anymore, and they realized it must have affected his legs. And so then all the way up through high school, he wore braces, those big metal braces on his legs. And when he was up until he was like 5 or so, he had to wear those crutches that they fasten onto your arms. And he looked like a March of Dimes kid. And so I just think of growing up that way must have been so difficult. And it's a really beautiful story because he ends up with amazing character and just such a wonderful man, because he learned to live through all that. But when I think of him alive, more alive than ever, I think of him being able to run and being able to move and jump and do all the things that he was able to walk. He had a little bit of not everybody noticed it, but ever so often somebody would say, "Oh, you're limping today." It's like, no, I limp every day. And so to just think he doesn't have a limp and that he's living such a great life. Also, he loved books incredibly. And I think about him talking to all the authors. And so I think of him having just these great conversations and him just being like, "Oh, wow, I never knew that." Or "I read this. Well, tell me about that." So I think about him just sitting with John or Paul or, whatever other Bible character, hearing their stories, and people really, really liked him. So anyway, I love talking about him. Thanks for letting me. It was actually on Wednesday, 2 days ago, was his death date. So it feels extra special to get to talk about him.
Yeah. What was his name again? What's your husband's name?
Everybody called him Buddy, which isn't exactly a name, but his real name was Douglas. But because he had those braces on his legs and the crutches on his arms, wherever he went, it was the braces don't let you walk heel toe. They would have him swing his legs because the braces kind of kept him stiff. So he would swing his legs and keep his balance with the crutches. But it made everybody see him, and they would ruffle the top of his head and say, "Hey, buddy, how are you? Hey, buddy." And all the way through the day, people were "Hey, buddy" in him. And so when they asked what his name was, it must be Buddy.
Yeah.
Which I think is just kind of.
And through his ministry too, he would be called like Buddy. And so how did you and Buddy meet? How did you guys meet up?
So we were both in college in the same school, but we hadn't met at school. And on weekends, we did ministry work in the inner city of Chicago with gangs. And so I was working in the inner city with these gangs, and he was working inner city with these gangs. And we met literally in the ghettos of Chicago.
Wow.
Which I don't think ghetto is even a proper term anymore, but that's back in the 70s when we met, that's how it was said. So
yeah, I don't know what the right jargon would be. I don't know, but just the same, it was a very chance meeting. So you met at college, and then you guys set off in ministry, and huge ministry.
Yeah. So, it was really interesting. I love that we met doing something that we both were doing, not that he was doing it and I joined him. I love that that's what I was doing because that was important to me. And that was what was important to him. And because it was important to each of us, our meeting made such sense because we were already interested in the same thing, which really, I think, was part of the beauty of our ministry together, is that we both had a heart for it. And although I didn't know that he was going to be a pastor when I first met him, when he said that that's what he was going to do, it was, yeah, that's a great idea. Like, we could just keep doing what we're doing, only do it full time and finish school and just go right into this. So we went out to Boise, Idaho, and we were out there for 7 years, started a church. And it was really funny to me that we were in a place that we could have just stayed there in Chicago and had a good ministry opportunity there. And he had family down in Atlanta, where he was from, that every generation since the Civil War, he had had pastors. And so he could have gone to the South and had a really easy time. But his mindset, partly from the polio, was, let's go to the hardest place. And if it will work in the hardest place, then it's going to work in all of the easy places. And so we set out to go to Boise, Idaho, that had, it said that it was 97% Catholic when we went out there. And back in the 60s, which you wouldn't have been around to remember, it was a big controversy if Catholics could even be believers, because so this was a big deal. And now this was the 70s that we're in, and we were believing that Catholics, of course, if they believed in Jesus, then they could. Well, and it may look a little different because they had some extra baggage or extra things that they were believing, but that God would be really faithful to teach them. And so certainly they could. So many people in Chicago were Catholic. We thought that going out to Boise would be a hard place, but at the same time, we could do it. We could go there, and we've been with these people, so we could do it here, only to find out when we got out there that it was like 93% Mormon, and that the brochures didn't say that. And there wasn't online stuff that you looked up. You only went by brochure information back then. But we ended up making friends with Mormons and connecting with the things that actually were the same. So they're wonderful right to life people. And we connected through that. And we were only like 22 when we went out there. And by the time he was 26 or 27, and we knew no one in the whole state when we went there. But by the time we were 26, 27, they were asking him to run for governor.
Wow.
And that they just loved what he was bringing and how he saw things, and that, yeah. So that went really well. We came back and started a church in Atlanta. And for a long time, it was just a long process of building a base. 17 years, 700 people from zero. So it wasn't like overnight growth at all. Long, slow, steady learning, growing, maturing. And then we hit a point in 2000 that it went from about 700 to like 7,000 in the next 10 years. Yeah. That was just, wow. What's going on?
That's huge.
It goes from being addition to multiplication. Mm-hmm. And what we were multiplying. Yeah.
What do you think it is?
So there was
sorry, and I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm interrupting, Jody. We got a bit of a delay. Yeah, but I hear you nudging at something when you talk about Boise, and just the cutting edge attitude you guys had of loving people. And it was like, we love Christians, we love Catholics, we love Mormons. And back then that was very atypical. Mm-hmm. That's part of this mm-hmm. movement that we're finding ourselves in now, where it's like, we can love our neighbor, we can love ourselves, we can love our enemy. and we're
Yeah.
that friendliness. So what,
Well,
like, how did you guys do that back then?
how did we know to love, or how
Yeah.
did we do the love?
Yeah, both.
It was really odd. Yeah, I think the know the love, I really think it had to do with both of our upbringing. I think because he was so well loved by people everywhere he went, I think it was probably pity, but also because he was just a cutie and responded with such love back that people were kind of mesmerized by him. And then I mean, like, whether it was the gas station people or the toll booth people or like, just whatever, wherever, he was never looking for the people that were important and trying to get into the important people. I think he just really loved the everyday, common, normal, whoever you were with, people. And it was super attractive. It's so attractive for people to love people that I know that's why God wants us to do it. But it's so weird that that's the unusual instead of the right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and then I think the how was that now I have a different language than I would have put on it then. What I would call it now is that we withed well. That incarnation of Jesus is that, and his name shall be called Emmanuel, God with us. And that when God tried to love us and be friends with us and come to us, he did it through Jesus, and he did it to just Jesus to come be with, among, just with. He didn't, it wasn't, and his name shall be called celebrity or important one, although he was and he is. But he just did the withing so well. I think he just withed the disciples. So my words now are, we withed well. And it's still my goal. Actually, a ministry I want to do is just called withing.
I love that.
Which is kind of an odd way.
But no, that makes sense from an attachment perspective. We talk about being with, this, like, that what's hidden in plain sight, and the moments with our children or with our loved ones. When I hear you speak about Buddy, Jody, and I just hear the heart of a spouse that loved their partner and had compassion and care and saw his value. And that's not always an easy thing to do in marriage, to be fond of our partner in that way, which I think is really special. And that's as well as a ministry spouse, like you two were in ministry together, and how you speak about Buddy. Not everybody does that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. All the way back in middle school, I was learning to read my Bible, and I was in a situation in my home that I could see when husband and wife didn't love each other, and when one was a believer, one wasn't, or one wanted to love God and one didn't really want to have regard for God, that it didn't make for a healthy and good relationship. And so, like, I began to be really committed in 5th, 6th, 7th grade that I was going to marry somebody that loved God. And so I had this little Bible, and it was King James back then, that's all we knew. And I would underline and highlight and find verses that was going to be what I wanted my life to look like, and how I was going to do this life with somebody that really loved God. And talking about that really will make me choke up. But I used to write in the margin as a little kid, someday my prince would come, and it would be SDMPWC. You know, I would put out in the margin, and I had all of these verses. And this little Bible just, I didn't know how to know God or to be close to him well, other than following rules of my religion. And the following rules, I could tell, wasn't really making me feel close to him. But I would sleep with my Bible under my pillow so that I could sleep with God, because I didn't know how else to be close to him. In all of that, I think when I met Buddy, I could just look back at all of those verses and all of the things that, oh, I found him. He was here, and this was him. And I remember the first year we got married, it was really funny. We had been together, just boyfriend, girlfriend kind of thing, for maybe 3 years as best friends. And when we got married, he said, oh, we were having a rough day. I don't know, something he was doing I didn't like. And I remember looking at him, and he said, what is it? And I said, well, I think I don't want to tell you because it's scaring me. And he said, no, I think you should tell me. What is it? I can tell it's really something on your mind. I said, well, I'm afraid because I don't think I like you today. And it's the first time I don't like you. And he just started laughing. And I said, oh, I don't think it's funny. Like, it scares me. And he said, oh, it's okay. I don't always like me either. And then it just made me laugh and go, yeah, that's a great answer, right? And so then it would, he said, always feel free to tell me that you don't like me. And I'll see what I'm doing, and maybe I can fix it, or maybe I'm just not going to like me either. But it was that kind of a great relationship that he invited me into, being able to speak my mind, and like, let me be me. And it was just really beautiful. So then I could really let him be him and celebrate him. But I was like his best cheerleader fan.
Yeah, I love that story, Jody. And it's that, I think too, it's something that I really hope people are starting to or find space for in our spiritual healing, when we can look back on our younger parts, our younger religious experience. Like when you talk about that cute little girl who you can see her value in her trying, and you can see what she knew that she didn't know. And it's beautiful, and it's sweet. It's a sweet little story. She wasn't just a rule-based, legalistic little child. She was really seeking to know that being with.
And I think it's really sad that the church teaches that rule idea. Like, if rules made us close to people, kids would love their principal or love the IRS. I mean, like, we don't love those things, like, that's the things that we draw away from. The more rules, the more we come away. So why we would put so many rules on God and think we're going to draw people into that, it's just kind of bizarre. I think there's another story all the way a little younger, that I had an uncle when I was 2, that when we would say goodbye to each other, he would always find me before he left, and he would say, see you later, alligator. And I knew that my response was, after a while, crocodile, that was, and it was just what he would say just to me. And we had this thing going. And then we moved away, probably when I was 3. And I ended my prayers with God, see you later, alligator, knowing that God was doing the after a while, crocodile.
Wow.
And that I did that for several years until I was probably 6 or 7. And my mom told our pastor, or our pastor heard me pray. And I had said that at the end of my prayer instead of amen. And when I said that, he said, "Oh, we can't say that. That is so wrong. God is holy and he is to be revered. And you have made him common. And he is so displeased with that." I remember just bawling of that I had disappointed God and made him not special when I was trying to make him special. And now when I look back at it, I just love that little heart and love that that's, and I'm so sorry that any pastor or any mom or dad or anybody would squelch that kind of a heart. And so often I hear kids loved God when they were little. And then as they grew, it was a separation. And it wasn't because of God. It was because of something that somebody said, or something happened at church and they were divided from God.
Yeah. Well, we
or
get
at least from the
rejected.
church, and they still love God under.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's such a touching story. Like I was like, it just the beauty of that, the relational, if I trusting and knowing that I'm saying see you later, alligator, and God is saying after a while, crocodile. It's such a relational view, and such a, the some of the language we use now is the God that you know. Like there's this inner child's God that this little girl knew, and then the rules will try to crush that out of us. Or when you guys went and befriended Catholics and Mormons and people who there's a evangelical tradition of othering, but just that relational ability, like you and Buddy both somehow had these childhoods where you understood love, and then you came together and you gave so much love.
It was really interesting for me to look back. I think he was like, when he told me that he was in love with me, we had been friends for several years, and I loved him like a friend. And I never thought of loving him romantically because he was the same height I was. And I really had these great shoes that were like high. It was in just early 70s, and when like platform shoes came out and wedge shoes and like all these great, I loved shoes. And so I didn't know that he loved shoes, but he loved shoes because he had those braces, and those braces only fit into one pair of shoes. And those one pair like had the braces stick down into him, and they were made special for his feet. And they were the same shoes all the way until he graduated from high school. Same look, different sizes, obviously. But then in high school, he had a muscle transplant, and then he didn't have to wear the braces, and he could wear regular shoes. And so he loved shoes. And so I think we probably even would comment on each other's shoes, but I was free to wear them because I would be like this much taller than he was. But we're just friends. And so who cares if one friend is taller than the other? But then when he told me that he was in love with me, which was a whole crazy, wonderful story, I wasn't sure I could be in love with him because, oh my goodness, like he wasn't tall enough. And I didn't really, he told me that he was in love with me, and I was so shocked that I started crying. Another story behind that story. But he said, "Well, don't you want to tell me that you love me?" And I was like, I don't think I can. I don't know. And he said, like, you don't know that you love me? It's like, of course I love you for like that kind of love. I just don't know if I love you. And so then he said, well, what do you think you should do? And I said, well, I think I'm going to have to pray. He said, how long are you going to have to pray? It's like, guess a week. I don't know, you know? And so during that week, I realized that I didn't know what love looked like.
Yeah.
I never saw love in my mom and dad. And I never felt love as a kid. I really felt rejection, set aside, apart, and didn't fit in my family. And so I didn't know what love looked like. And it wasn't until I was talking to God about it and telling God, like, I'm not sure he's tall enough. I always saw myself with somebody taller. And he said the whole story of David, you know, that God looks on the heart and not on the outward appearance. And so then it was like, oh, I could do that. I like that idea. And so then I realized that I had loved him all along, and I just didn't know that that was love, because I was trying to not love him because he wasn't tall enough, which is so silly. But I think in the keeping myself at bay from him actually gave myself all the freedom to love well, because I wasn't wondering if he was gonna love me to be in love with me. Does that make sense?
I think it totally makes sense. It's interesting because I was thinking about this when I was driving in this morning, of being in my 20s and thinking the superficial thoughts about love. And that, so I wrote a whole book on love, and love is not fluff, but we think about it so fluffy. And when I was in my 20s, there was so many people that I didn't, men that I didn't try to love, or friends that I didn't try to know, because I had this, again, what you're talking about. I didn't know what love was. I had been in the church my whole life, and I had no idea what love was. I didn't know what God's love was. I didn't believe in a loving God, period. Even if I said I did, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
So it's a cute story. Yeah. And I think a lot of us are like, oh, I know. I remember being 22 or 20, and, we just think we need this handsome partner.
Yeah. And I just knew he had to be tall, like, of course he would be tall. I'm 5'8", and he was 5'7 3/4. So we were just like, I wore flats for the next 40 years. And he would say, you can still wear your tall shoes. And I was like, I know, I don't want to. But when he died, it wasn't intentional, but I had gone shopping after he passed away. And maybe 2 months or so later, I was shopping in Florida with a friend, and we went to this off Saks kind of one of those outlet stores, and they had great shoes, and it was like, oh, look at these. And they were high wedged. The back was about this big and the front was about this big, red sandals that were so cute. And it was like, oh, I want to wear these. And I put them on, and I was so tall again. It was like, oh, I remember when I used to be this tall. And I bought those shoes, and people would be, I never realized how tall you were. It's like, well, I never wore them because of Buddy. And they said, so now that Buddy's gone, you're going to wear them? And I said, oh, now I'm wearing them because I think Buddy's taller.
Oh,
so it was really, really fun to me to wear those shoes, and that it kind of went full circle. Although it's still really, I don't know. I wouldn't say that that's important, but I also think that it's kind of the full circle of truth of my heart. I really like beauty. I am a interior designer. And so all of those little pieces matter to me. Cute shoes are a real deal.
I do think it's full circle of you, Jody. Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt again. There's a bit of that leg, but the full circle, what I am learning from you right now is how a loving marriage really can teach us spiritual love. like, it's such a testimony. Your story right now is like, wow, you and Buddy really helped each other with your own spiritual healing just by loving each other.
Mm-hmm. We did. And I think he loved me so well that he taught me what love was like. He taught me what forgiveness was like. He just taught me so much. And I think when somebody teaches you that, it's, I don't know, maybe it's like loving your nurse or your doctor that was part of your healing, that you can't help but just love them, you know, that he taught me so much about God, but so much about life. Just, I was so grateful, so thankful for him. And he was super adventurous. So his adventuresomeness, he had no fear. And I wonder if it had to do with the polio that he already faced. One of the hardest things that anybody would face is a crippling disease, you know what I mean? And facing it as a kid, then he had no fear after that. And I was super fearful. And 9/11, for instance, when everybody was not going to New York because, you know, it's a dangerous place, and they're our enemy. The Muslims are our enemy now, not the Catholics, not the Mormons, but let's make the Muslims our enemy. It's kind of the flavor of the decade of who we're going to have as an enemy. And he was like, nobody's even flying there. You know, there's hardly anybody's flying anywhere. But he decides the week of, like 3 days, 2 days, whatever it was on a Tuesday. So I think, by Friday, we already had a mission team headed to New York. And what we did is set up tables on the sidewalks, just card tables on the sidewalk with handwritten paper note on the front of it that said prayer. Hung on the front of it. People lined up 50 people deep to be prayed with on the streets of New York City. Like, amazing. So everybody else was staying away and missing that opportunity. He would run toward danger to see what he could do to change it. And it was really, really opened up so many doors and so many opportunities.
I love that.
I have a million stories about all that.
I think that's beautiful too, because I've just been really struck. I'm reading this gorgeous book by Eric Johnson called Ponder, and he's writing about, he really just made it come alive. Love your enemy. We love our enemy, and our enemy is not our enemy. And so even like when you tell the story of the fear about Muslim culture at 9/11, and it was a big thing, but here you go, and you guys set up this table just offering prayer. And to me, that is so loving. Like, it's not about getting people to recite some magical words and, you know, all of a sudden they've got a free pass into heaven. It's like, how can we be with you? And how can we do something beyond us? Like, if I could pray for you, maybe that would do more than anything that just this human person could do. So that's beautiful. Yeah. And hard. That was a scary time.
We had a really beautiful video. It was a scary time, but he did videos that we would play at church that were in helping people understand that Muslims were not the enemy. They were the prize. And just to rethink, why would you think they're the enemy? I mean, like, even think about Psalms 23, that he says that he would set a table before us in the presence of our friends, in the presence of our family, in the presence of our colleagues. No, he says he sets a table before us in the presence of our enemies. Like, that's an amazing part of Psalm 23 that we don't think we even want. But he knows that if we are with our enemies, that they're not enemies at all. They end up being our
Yeah.
friends, that the lie is that they're an enemy.
Yeah.
The truth is that they are like us, that we are like them. When we were just after the wall came down after the Cold War,
Yeah.
and Reagan had the wall removed, we went to the Ukraine. And again, they were the communists. They were the enemy of that age. And when we went there, we went to someone's home that had been a guard in a tower at the wall.
Mm.
And when he was the guard at the tower at the wall, they had to be in his home was just amazing. It's like, we are actually sitting in the home of a communist. You know what I mean? Like, that was really scary. When I was little, everybody prayed for the communists because they were hopeless, and that wouldn't, and then Wednesday night prayer meeting, there would always be somebody and pray for the communists. You know what I mean? But it felt like praying for Al-Qaeda. Like, they're not going to change. So here it is. The wall comes down. We're in the communist home. And we find out that he was actually a Christian living in the Ukraine. And that when his dad became a believer, they were sent up to Siberia. And Siberia used to be like the ends of the earth. The worst thing to ever happen is if you got sent off to Siberia. And so then he said, but it was a wonderful life in Siberia. And then so we were going through a translator, and the translator translated that they lived in Siberia and it was a wonderful life. And it was like, wait a minute, wait, stop. Roll that back. That can't be right. You must have translated that wrong. You can't say that Siberia was wonderful. Siberia was like the worst place ever, God-forsaken, horrible. And so we said that to the man, and the man started laughing, back through the translator. And he laughs and he says, no, it was wonderful. And we say, how could it be wonderful? We were praying for you because it was so awful. And he said, but when they were in the city, there wasn't enough food, and they couldn't meet, and they had underground church, and they were always being followed, and it was a horrible life. But when they actually were deported into Siberia, then you were put with all of the other Christians. And then it was like a big reunion of all the Christians, and it was wonderful because they were all together. And there were blocker towers in the city that you couldn't hear the gospel in the city. But out in Siberia, they didn't think that there was any radio way out there. And so there was free radio, and they would record it and smuggle it back down into the city. And so it was actually the effect of putting them out was actually the blessing of God. And I said, but what about food? And it was so cold. And he said, there was abundance of food because we could go out and kill any animal, and they had all of the food. And then they said, we ate meat and everybody else was eating bread. And so we had all of this. And then we had all the skins of the animals. And so we were super warm. So it was just like, oh man, in places that I thought God would be forsaking somebody, was actually like a little cradle of care.
Yeah, I love that story too, Jody. And
Beautiful.
It's just, you're such a testimony, and you and Buddy, of this, like, looking beneath the labels and seeing the value of the person, and then meeting people in their humanity and hearing the stories, and that loving is such a spiritual action.
Mm-hmm. And it's exactly the model of Jesus. Like when we are modeling Jesus. He listened to stories, told stories. He was just with people. everywhere he went. I really think it is one of the most godly things that we could do is to just be with people. And when you're with them and you hear their stories, I think you can't help but love them.
Yeah.
Because you recognize your story in their story, and you recognize your feelings in their feelings. Like they were afraid. He told stories about how he was so afraid of the Americans and how they would have drills in case the Americans came and were going to try to wipe them out. And we were like, oh, we had drills. We would have to hide under our desk in case the communists set off bombs for us. And he was like, well, they were making us afraid of you.
Yes.
And we were like, and they were making you afraid of us.
Yeah.
And we were so sorry. And we were able to hug. Like, how crazy to be able to hug people that you thought you had to be afraid of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
And there's, I think too, you know, like, especially, just the healing of this type of mercy fueled love and peace fueled love. And this is a type of God that I want to believe in. And this is a good God. It's so different than to be able to sit with, like, I love my Muslim friends and we can have such rich, beautiful conversations about God because we can look beneath the label. They're not looking at my label. I'm not looking at theirs. We're just being with each other, talking about beautiful things.
And if we can find common ground with people, wherever that common ground is, you know, that I think then an enemy doesn't stay an enemy.
Yeah. Yeah. And
they want to raise.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
They want to raise families and have happy homes and have a happy life like we do. So that's a common ground right at the very beginning and basic of all of us.
Yeah. And we should be so offended. Like, I don't like the word enemy, and it's uncomfortable because it feels so othering. Even to say love your enemy, I'm like, that sounds like I believe somebody is less than me. But like you said, when we love our enemy, they're a friend, they're a companion.
I saw this, I did this, I have this wonderful Bible that I really love. I think I told you about it. It was called the Mirror Bible. Mm-hmm. And in it has, I don't know, I just love the way it's translated. And I'm looking for a piece of paper here. And anyway, I was thinking about when you said judgment, I was noticing that when I would read judgment in the Bible, it wouldn't be but another verse or two before or after that it would talk about salvation or righteousness. And so I was like, I wonder, like, these are always together. And so then I was thinking, I wonder, how do I see what is judgment to me? And I just, in the margin of my Bible, I drew this picture of judgment. And I think in pictures, Tara, because I don't know. I just see things in pictures. And so this is judgment. It's when we put somebody on a scale in a balance and we just determine that they're coming up short, that they're not good enough. That's kind of the enemy. Like you said, I hate looking at people and thinking that they're not good enough. But that's what we do in judgment. And that's what enemy looks like. They're not the same as me. They didn't measure up. But sometimes we even judge ourselves and we say ourself is not measuring up. And so as I wrote this, I was like, oh yeah, that is so judgment. And I look at people judged, and I hate that about my wrong thinking. But I was thinking then, as soon as I was doing this, it's like, then I know what righteousness is. And it was so fun that before I could even get that one written, I knew how to draw the next one. That's righteous. It's when we're seeing things even, equal. Mm-hmm. But what I really loved about that, so these are the little weigh scales, right? You know that.
Yeah.
Does that make, I know they're not very good.
Oh, no,
but
that I could,
if
they
you
make
take
sense.
these little weigh scales off of that, what is?
Yeah.
It's the cross.
Yeah.
And when we look at people this way, we're saying that they didn't measure up or we didn't measure up. And God never looks at us this way. Real love always looks at this way, that they measure, that they're the same, that they're equal, that God balances whatever we did, and that God only sees us in righteousness. Mm-hmm. This is his view of us. This is our view of each other. And we need to have God's view of ourselves and God's view of each other. And if we look at this, like even when I'm playing pickleball, I'm super competitive and I try not to be, but I played like 25 years of competitive tennis and I would just get too competitive. And so I was determined that when I play pickleball, I'm not going to do that. But lo and behold, if my partner and I are playing and they miss a shot, I'm okay. 2 shots, I'm okay. 3 or 4 shots, and I'm like, you're not measuring up. And I will just get so frustrated with myself, like, don't see him that way, don't see him that way. But once I realized that this was my scale I was doing, I'm able to go, nope. Yeah. I do the same thing. Like, I'm equal to you, you're equal to me, we both make mistakes, it's okay. And then like I can see them through righteousness, and that's right thinking and right.
Yes,
that's the cross. Like, I love that. So that's only a couple of weeks old that I have had that, but I have love it.
Yeah. So there's 2 things I'm thinking. So first off, this too reminds me of the story you shared of Buddy, where you said, I don't think I like you. And to me, his response was so Christ-like when he says, well, sometimes I don't like me. He could have said, well, that's okay. Sometimes I don't like you. But his response was so loving of like, I know me. I don't always like me. And that feels so balanced too. And it's interesting because I feel like my scale I just had bad anxiety the past couple of days, really bad. And I can get really bad bouts of anxiety, but my scale was imbalanced, my own scale, my own self love. And it's shocking because, I'm going through everything. I'm like, Tara, like you're doing amazing. Like, this is a great life. This is a great few days. But to break ourselves out of when the scale gets imbalanced in ourselves, it's so hard,
Yeah, I think you ask God that question. God, how do you see me? And when we ask him that, I think it breaks it to this. And it's like, oh, yes, you're right. And I need to see me like you see me. We don't have the right to actually see this. God did this for us. Yeah. And he paid such a high price for this, that who are we to go this?
Yeah. And to not understand that that's love, that's again, this epiphany that you're talking about is this, like, I didn't know what love was. And then your story is so much of like, I kept discovering and like, you think of what you knew of love when you fell in love with Buddy in that moment, and now what you know of love all these years later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting for me to even know love post-death. That, it says, till death do us part, that you're going to love somebody till death do us part. It's like, the truth is, I love him as much or more after death than I did before, that somehow at death, love can't disappear because it was too
Yeah,
real to go till just death. Do you know what I mean? So
definitely.
it's, I don't know. I'm sure some people think I ought to just get over it. And um but it's maybe not that I couldn't love another. I don't know. But I don't think that I should diminish the love that I had just because he died. Like
No,
that doesn't seem
and
honest. Or
I don't think so either. And then I think too, Jody, like your story is a healing story for me and for other people as well. Like for people to hear, it's like this is the power of a loving marriage. Like this is, our self-sacrificing love, our learning to put put me aside sometimes so that I could love you better, or to humble myself that I don't have to win an argument, or I don't have to zing you because you zing me, and just this space to love more and more and more. And that is a place then too where we can discover more of the supernatural love. Like, what is God's love? Like, if people can love like this.
and I think we can even ask God, God, what is it that I fear? Or what is it that is in me that makes me think I have to win this argument? Like,
Yeah.
what if I didn't? What if I didn't win this argument? What would that look like? Or what does that bring up in me? Um, and generally, I think it brings up a childhood memory. And so we can go back to those childhood memories and ask
Mm.
God about those, and get that healing. When I was 53, I heard some really dear friends um, came into my life that became dear friends, actually, that taught me how that process of inner healing was. And I think Buddy was my healer in those years between my 20 and 50. But then I got inner healing and really saw that it was actually God all along.
Mm.
And from my 50s now to my 70s, God has been my healer. And I had Buddy in the wrong place. But it was really as if God let me understand who he was through Buddy. And then once I began to see the healing, I could see, oh, Buddy was just like the teacher of what that looked like, because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know God that way. I didn't know Jesus that way. I knew Buddy that way.
Mm.
And so now I know Jesus to actually be that. And I think I know Jesus better because of Buddy, and that
Yeah.
God was using Buddy to love me and to bring me into more wholeness through those years until I could actually recognize that it was him all along.
That's
You
glorious,
know,
and so I'll to say this too. It's like my I see the trend right now is that people get upset with themselves, or they go through hardships, and then they realize that they had a broken view of God and they give up. But so much of, like, in all of your story, you could have given up so many times, but you kept discovering and rediscovering and rediscovering. And it, again, that's what I'm hoping people are hearing in these conversations, and with your conversation, Jody, where it's like you never gave up. You've been through a lot and you just kept leaning into the mystery and finding more beautiful love and more beautiful spirituality.
well, I think we want certainty, and we think we want to know all the that we're sure about this, and we're sure about this, and this is what God looks like. He fits in this box, and then he does this, and then he does that. But when we get him all in those boxes, which he never actually gets in. We just make the boxes up and think he's in it, but he's never in the box. But as we box him into these certainty, we leave no room for mystery. And when you're so certain, it really gets boring and not true. And you find it to be, oh, that can't be true. You know, like it reveals itself over time that doesn't even work, or that wasn't even right. That can't be. And then if you were so certain, then you think that there was something wrong with God instead of just something wrong with the way you saw God.
Yeah.
And so when you ask God, God, would you reveal who you really are? Then I think the mystery happens. And then we don't really have to know all this. It's not good to put God in a box. He's so much bigger than a box that then we can embrace the mystery of this relationship. And I think then we ask all the questions and we can be really honest. Like I was honest with Buddy to say, I don't think I like you today. And his reply wasn't, well, what's wrong with you? Of course you should like me today. Like, you know, fight it out with me. That when I was honest, then he was honest back. When we're honest with God, we think God's gonna like fuss back at us about it, but he's gonna meet it with that kind of love of, that's all right. And he's not gonna say that he doesn't like him on some days, but he can certainly understand how what we're seeing of him is inaccurate. And I think he's just more than willing to, if we ask him, God, what do you want me to know? Is a phrase that I have learned that's really changed my life. And I learned it from a friend that had changed her life. And I do the coaching for a company. And that's one of the questions that we have people asking people all the time is, God, what do you want me to know? And as you ask him those questions, then you learn to listen. And it's not a certain thing. You don't just like say, okay, well, this is the scripture and he's going to say this. We know that God said so much more than he said in scripture. Remember, like John even said, that I couldn't even write it all down. It was more than could be contained. Yeah. So why would we think that in a relationship with somebody, like in my relationship with you, you don't answer me with, we'll go to page 53 and read second paragraph. You know, why would we think that the only way he's going to talk to us is in scripture and say that you have to read, read 1 John 3:10, you know? So I love that we can ask him questions, be super honest of where you are and what you're feeling. And when we do, then that's when he can correct things and has the freedom to put things back in balance and really show us his love. The first time I did it, I really thought he was going to like strike me dead with a lightning bolt and that I was going to be on the page, the front page of the Atlanta Constitution saying pastor's wife gets struck by a lightning bolt and on a perfectly sunny day, you know? But I remember telling him that I think he messed up and put me in the wrong family. And it was just like, I'm so sorry, but I think you messed up. And he wasn't offended by that. He invited me into, well, let me show you, let me tell you, let me help you see what was really happening. And so our honesty is really an invitation to relationship.
Yeah. And too, it's that like, see you later, alligator, after a while, crocodile. The tone of I am meetable and God is meetable. And there's that, like that being with that you're speaking about too. It's hard when we get wobbly, when I'm off, I'm misaligned. I don't trust that I am meetable. And that's sad. And it is scary. And if we put God in a box, then we're also putting people in a box. We're putting ourselves in a box. And it's psychologically, it's like, that's why people go for therapy, is because they're living in a box and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, this is
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, Jody, so
You
we should
know,
probably, okay, you'll have one more. I think you have another thing to say. We should wind things down, but what are you going to say? Tell me, because you're just on fire.
um, I was just noticing that our what we're thinking in our mind is actually being revealed in our body often. That when our mind is wobbly, we may not be able to see the wobble, but what we see is our shoulders go down, our head goes down, our throat gets tightened, our breathing changes. We're not having deep breaths. We have shallow breathing or tight breathing. Our stomach tenses up, and we just feel ourselves we're thinking we're less than, and our body is actually curling into less thanness. Like, I remember, have you tried on a pair of pants or an outfit and you think that you're too fat, and you come
Oh, of
out
course.
and you look in the mirror at the dressing room and you do oh, this is really bad look. And then, like, our brain is telling us through our body that we're doing it. And I love that it's just trying to our body's trying to tell us what our head is thinking. And then when we say, oh, I think I must be thinking wrong, God, what do you want me to know? Then we get rid of the wrong thinking, the wobble, and we go straight. And what it does is actually affects our body, and we sit up straight. Our head goes up, our throat is less tense, we breathe deeper, our stomach is better. Like, we have a different position when we're in right thinking and when we're in wrong thinking.
Yeah,
Isn't that
it's
amazing
true.
that our body would be telling?
It is true. And you can see,
You
like,
can see it in other people even.
yeah, and I mean, I think like Dr. Daniel Amen and Dr. Carolyn Leaf, and there's these amazing neuropsychologists and psychiatrists that would totally agree. The benefits of prayer cools down a hot brain, the benefits of positive thinking, and how it does, like, the brain health, the spiritual health in our mind benefits our whole being. And it's mysterious again.
Yeah. But it also is Romans 12, 1 and 2, and it says, change the way you think. It is about your mind. Like, it is therefore, brothers, I don't want to, it's been a long time since I've said this one. Be not conformed to this world, but by the transforming of your mind. That is a whole lot of it has to do with our mind. And I have this thing, I may have told you about the REEL and the REAL, that when we're seeing things in the REEL, it is what we could take on our camera sort of thing. And we call those reels on Instagram or reels on Facebook. It's what we see, but it's not REAL. REAL is what our heart sees. And so learning to differentiate between what our REEL is seeing and the REAL is, God, this is what I'm seeing, but what do you want me to see? What is the REAL here?
Yeah.
It's just been such transformation in my thinking.
So,
especially with alone.
Oh, and I think, and what we're talking about with the word enemy, even this makes sense, the real versus the real. And I would say, Jody, like, what just came to me is, like, the God that Jody knows is a relational God, that there's a friendship, and that's that heart space. When you talk about your prayer life, is like, we can have a really lovely connection to the God that we know. Yeah.
For
Okay.
Sure.
So I'll put some of Jody's information down below, how you guys can track down Jody if you're interested in finding her. Thank you so much, Jody. I adore you. And I feel so honored.
So,
yeah. And it's such a surprise, like, these beautiful friendships. When I met you, I just remember when I finally, like, had a chance to talk to you at Jim and Terry's house. on such a deep level. And I was like, wow, like who knew what a thrill it would be to hear you and to learn from you.
Oh, that's really sweet, Tara. Really sweet. And it's really funny that I hadn't thought about it and I not planned, but our whipping is on Valentine's Day, and we talked about love. Like
Yeah.
that was a really special day. I'm sure it doesn't end up airing on Valentine's Day, but and for me, it's like, oh, you were my Valentine
You're
today.
my
Thank you, Tara.
Valentine. You're my Valentine. So we're Valentines,
Oh.
and everybody else can just deal with it. Jody and I are Valentines.
Yeah. But it was sweet. It was a special thing that God gave us today. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you too.